Welcome to RiderChoices RiderCoach Life. RiderCoach Life is a dialogue with rider coaches for enhancing communications while helping to develop and improve our culture. We share experience and knowledge in our efforts to reduce crash injuries and fatalities in motorcyclists. So this is going to be kind of a special edition tonight, only because it wasn't expected, although it's something I really wanted to do for a very long tonight. And what's special about tonight is we have a special unannounced guest. But before I introduce him, I wanted to share that several years ago, and I'm thinking back, and it was probably somewhere around the 2016 time period, so 10 years ago. Hard to believe. I emailed this gentleman seeking guidance after reading a book that he co-authored. And I had been through a period of failure after about 5 years of being a rider coach, where, and by the way, 3 to 5 years is generally the longevity in time of a rider coach. If you get beyond that, you're doing really good. But I had a huge failure in my coaching career, and I decided to address it only by digging in deeper and going a little bit further and pursuing more education. So out of the blue, I sent this guy an email, and he probably thought I was insane, but I asked him for some guidance, and believe it or not, he emailed me back. I think I was in Korea at the time. And the correspondence was great. It was great to kind of get a little feedback. But more importantly, when he replied to me, by addressing me as coach. And that term kind of solidified my realization that, yeah, I was a coach. And up till that point, even though we used the term rider coach, it really didn't stick with me. But when he called me a coach, I was like, I'm a coach and I need to do better. Because I don't think, although I was serious about it, I probably wasn't serious about the word coach. And so it completely changed my perspective. And it led to the last 10 years of really focused work. And I want you to clue in on that word focused, because I think it's an important word, including everything that led up to originally Tribe Talk and then Rider Coach Life. So the formation of what we do every couple of weeks was sort of a result of what this gentleman did for me. Since then, we've broken bread together, and I think I've talked about it with this group. And he has graciously tonight agreed to talk coaching with us and perhaps highlight his latest research with Karen Given, published last year on a term called deliberate practice. Before I do that, though, I wanted to cover his resume a little bit. He has a BA of Education from the University of Tucson. He has an MA in psychology and an MA in psychology and a PhD in psychology from Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. He served our nation in Arizona in 1956 through 1960. He had a graduate fellowship at Northwestern University underneath U.S. Public Health Service. He had a community research project and an early education project, both in Hawaii, one with the National Institute of Mental Health and the other one with the Princess Bernice Pauhi, I probably pronounced that wrong, Bishop Estate. He received an award for presidential research recognition At the University of California, he is an awardee of the Albert J. Harris Award from International Reading Association, the Gray Meyer Award from the University of Louisville, and Best Research of the Year from a group called Leaning Forward. Coaches, please let me introduce to you Dr. Ronald Gallimore, Senate Emeritus of Psychiatry and Biobehavioral Sciences from the University of California School of Medicine.
Wow. Good evening, coaches. Coach Wooden would say all of you are teachers because coaching is just teaching. And I think that counseling is teaching, pastoring is teaching. Almost anything one of us does to influence and help another person is a form of teaching. So the fundamental is about teaching. So I started out in clinical psychology many, many years ago and transitioned into studying teaching for children in communities where they don't usually do very well. And by a stroke of good luck, I got to know Coach Wooden, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. But I want you to know this is a sacred and honored role you all play as a teacher. And you not only teach through your organized programs as rider coaches, but you always are teaching by the example of your own behavior. That was a fundamental principle of John Wooden. We are always teaching by the example of our behavior. So no matter where you are, when people know you and you have some chance to teach by example, it's good to be cognizant of that. None of us are perfect. We're not always going to remember that. Sometimes I get grumpy and I don't always live up to my own principles, but it's one I really strive to do. So I'm going to share a PowerPoint with you that I put together, mainly because it's got some really cool pictures. 1974, John Wooden was entering his last. Can you all see this? This photograph?
I can see it.
Okay. This is a picture of Pauley Pavilion where UCLA plays its basketball games. And you can see hanging from the rafters are banners celebrating the 10 national championships that John Wooden won while he was a coach at UCLA. And those 10 championships were won in 11 years, 7 in a row. Extraordinary, so much so that he was named the Coach of the Year. 1974, with his permission, my colleague and I, the late Roland Tharp, began going to practices and observing Coach Wooden teaching on the basketball court. We collected thousands of observations. We coded them. We analyzed them, wrote an article that appeared in Psychology Today in 1976. So that was the beginning of the research I did on coaching all those years ago. Now, being the coward that I am, I did not have the guts to reach out to Coach Wooden. I had met him briefly. I had permission from him. But when I sent him a copy of the Psych Today article, thanking him for his cooperation, I never heard back. So from 1976 to 2002, I was scared to death to find out what he thought about that article. Well, by happy chance, I learned he was handing out photocopies of it to all sorts of people. Well, that got me the courage to go and visit him in his little study in his condo outside, not far from UCLA. And here's a photograph of that condo. Let me make this a little better. I should have put this on the slideshow so it's bigger. Sorry, that's better.
Nice.
This is his little den in a condo. Wasn't a very big wasn't a very big condo, but this is what it looked like. It looked like that all the time. He never had a cell phone. He never got a computer and didn't care, didn't even want a modern TV. This is where I would meet with him and interview him about teaching and coaching and whatnot. This den of his is now behind sealed glass at the Hall of Champions on the UCLA campus.
Nice.
So if you ever visit there, go to the Hall of Champions where all the UCLA athletic triumphs are represented. And here is the reproduction. All the items are behind glass. You can actually look at this den, but it looks just like it did. Books everywhere, piles of paper. On the wall above the TV set are photographs of each of the 10 championship teams. He had stuff all over that place. It was not what you would think a condo would look like of a man like John Wooden. So I observed at Pauley Pavilion where they played. I went to his house and interviewed him, and eventually he came 3 times to our UCLA lab. And this is a photograph. The man on the left is Swen Nader, was one of his players who went on to an 11-year career in the NBA. And if anybody knows this story, Swen was the backup of Bill Walton. Bill Walton was 3 times College Player of the Year, an All-Pro in the Pro Hall of Fame. And because Bill was so good, Swen hardly ever got to play. In fact, he never started a college game in 3 years. But he was drafted in the first round because he was that good. He would have been a star anyplace else. And his story is an example of the power of teaching. How did Wooden persuade a 7-foot athletic guy come to UCLA, being warned in advance he might never get to play in a game? But he came, he stayed. Why did he do it? Because Wooden convinced him that he would get the very best basketball and academic education if he came and competed against Bill Walton every day for 3 years. And the reward was he was drafted in the first round. So pretty exciting stuff. Okay, now let's get to the tough stuff. One thing I would want you to take away, and I'm going to stop soon for questions. John Wooden had a curriculum of basketball, and it started out with basics and became increasingly sophisticated. And that allowed him to identify the sequence of skills that he would teach. So every day before practice, which lasted 2 hours, he and his assistants would spend 3 hours planning that practice, basing it off that detailed skill sequence. And every day in practice, he would target specific skills. I have the singular there, skill, but sometimes it was more than one. But they focused on that. If the players made mistakes or did other things wrong, they ignored it. They focused on that thing they were going to work on today. Now, here's the thing that shocks most coaches and fans when I tell them this. John Wooden never ran conventional scrimmages. Never. His assistant coach of 15 years told him he told me in an interview, never did it. Never saw him do it. No activity lasted more than 2 minutes. 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, and then he would stop and immediately deliver corrections, 10 to 15 seconds. Do it this way, not this way. Do it this way. And he would sometimes demonstrate and then blow the whistle and off they would go. They would do another 2 minutes. He would stop it and do it. Corrections. for 2 hours, nonstop, constant running. They had a system where there were 15 players. They needed 10 on the court at any one time. They had a system where somebody could go off the court, get a drink of water, but they all want to get back on as fast as they could. And so they ran for 2 hours and stopped every 2 minutes and got an earful of correction from Coach Wooden. Sometimes for the whole team, sometimes for individuals. I watched him do it. It was extraordinary. I, it's not like any coach I ever had or any ever coach I have read about. This constant stopping and giving corrections. And guess what he was correcting? The specific skills that were the focus of the day. The players could make all kinds of other mistakes and he would not say anything.
Ah,
He would take notes all during practice. Oh my God, I got to work on this because they're not doing it right. But he wouldn't stop and go off track to talk about something that was not on the plan. Not only that, he would never make up instruction on his feet. If he hadn't planned the instruction and what he would correct that day, he kept his mouth shut. He said it was a terrible mistake. Every time you make up instruction or coaching on the spot, you end up misteaching. Have to undo it for weeks because you taught the wrong thing because you hadn't thought it through. He never lectured. He never stopped and gave long-winded lectures. I watched him for the whole year. As I say, I interviewed former coaches, former players. They said he never did it. He never gave long lectures. Maybe at the beginning of the year, he would show them how to tie their shoes, put on their socks and tie their shoes. Otherwise, he never lectured them. He never preached morality to them. But you can guess from my opening remarks, the way he taught that kind of thing was by the example of his own behavior. So after a game at a visiting court, there's Coach Wooden helping pick up the towels from the floor, tidying up the locker room, picking up cups. He was with the players, and whatever he expected them to do, he did himself by the example of his own behavior. Honesty, never lied. He believed that players earned and deserved what they received. So if a player was late for practice, well, he could explain the reason. And if the player had a reputation of being on time, then there was no consequence. But if the player had a bad habit of that, the big consequence would be he could not practice that day. He was sent home. And that was considered a big punishment. So that was a typical instructional lesson for John Wooden. Constant activity, moving from one to another. Every 2 minutes, he would stop and correct. That was a lesson plan for John Wooden. Okay, so I'm going to show you one more picture, and then I'll stop and questions. This is the statue of John Wooden outside Pauley Pavilion, where the team still plays its basketball games. Okay, any questions? Any comments?
Do not be bashful.
I just read the book this week, and the only reason why I didn't follow any professional sports. I don't know anything about basketball other than that I can't do it. I've never watched it, but at the end of our 2 weeks ago, two of these Rider Coach Life episodes ago, at the very end, Don just put this book up. Everybody's saying goodbye, and he puts up Swen's book. And I thought, well, if Don put it up there, I'm sure he did it for a reason, and that was the book. And so I picked it up, and I was incredibly struck by who he was as a person, coach. I loved what you wrote about him. And yours was the foreword, wasn't it? Ron?
Well, I co-authored the book with Swen, so
Oh, okay, okay, good.
that's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, it's all right. That's
No,
fine.
it's still swimming around in my head, and I haven't finished it yet. But anyway, um, I just was blown away by his level of detail. And of course, the story I related to Don Green was um, Swen's tale of already being a big guy, kind of a high school star. And Coach Wooden was honest with him right up front. You are never going to play in a game if you're playing really well, because I'm bringing you in to do a really hard job to make the center that I have better than anybody else out there. And the fact that he could do that, and of course you're well aware of how how you both cover that in the book, um, just blew me away. I mean, we're just teaching people to ride motorcycles, um, but it's pretty complex. And it would be the equivalent of me telling students, well, you're never going to ride on the road, but you're going to ride so that you can make somebody else better at what they're doing. And I don't think I could sell that. And it's clear from your writing and Swen's writing, it wasn't a sell job. He was just being honest. And he was saying, you're part of a team. You'll be as big a part um, as, what was the center's name? Bill, is it
Walton.
Walton? Uh,
And
as,
Bill Walton was the person who also wrote the foreword.
that's right. Okay, I got you guys mixed up. Sorry. Anyway, so it's just, and I didn't even know you're going to be here. And so I'm being a little fanboyish, but it's uh, it's been a lot of fun to hear you speak. One question I do have, and that's something that I dove into a little bit, was random contextual interference effect. Um, do you see when you're looking at the way Coach Wooden did his scrimmages, say, or practice, to have them just scrimmage for 2 minutes, come out, and then throw them back in? Is that something that the contextual interference folks learned from, or am I way off base?
I actually don't know. That's something I'll have to follow up on. Now, mind you, he didn't pull them out after the 2 minutes. It's the same, mainly the same five guys on each team running up and down. So the sequence was he would start out with a team on offense and a team on defense. They would run whatever they were learning how to do. They would run that. If the shot was made, the ball went out of bounds and the defense became the offense, and they ran down to the other end of the court to run the same play. If the shot was missed, a fast break would start and they would run down. And after one time, you know, up and down, he would blow the whistle, correct for 15 seconds, blow the whistle, and they would do the same thing, the same, practicing the same play. So let's say they were practicing, I won't give a name to it, but just a particular basketball play that involved both things that the offense and the defense had to learn. And a very specific, like what do you do if the guard goes right and passes left? You know, what do you do? And there's some very specific things. It's like a chess. If you know chess, you know there's specific moves. Same thing with basketball. There's all these moves, and one move leads to another move, and the players have to make those decisions instantaneously. So that's what would happen. They would run this same play up and down, up and down. Now, as players would, as individuals would come in and out, but the five on five would continue.
So Arthur, there is some random contextual interference going on, as you could tell, because of the interaction of the players. If they don't do the same thing, that's where that randomness comes, and that's also the development of um, the executive function comes in, where I have to deal with something else, even though I'm doing the same thing. As it changes randomly, I have to I have to accommodate what's going on. And those minor variations is what makes it better because your ability to adjust to whatever's going on, that interference makes you better. Just like the random contextual interference in the different size um, weaving that you do as a novice informs you to deal with those different inputs and the severity and the balance that goes along with it. So yeah, it's a very similar concept, and I want to say that the people have written about it in the motor skill development books kind of get it from basketball,
Mm.
and it wouldn't surprise me if there's a connection.
I would add this comment. Basketball and motorcycle riding have in common um, performance where judgment is under pressure.
Mm.
In basketball, that means if you're on offense and the defense does something unexpected, you have to make an instantaneous judgment under pressure, or you'll lose the ball or travel, right? Well, I'm sure in motorcycle riding, there's constant judgment under pressure. And I think what common there, John Wooden was trying to create situations in those 2-minute drills where the players were confronted with pressure and had to make an instantaneous choice whether to pass, whether to change direction, whether to dribble, whether to shoot. And he wanted to put them under that pressure. So they would have to practice in that under that context. And I think that's what you're talking about here with this
Right.
concept of random. I forgot what it
Contextual
is.
interference.
Yeah. I think we're talking about the same thing. Judgment
Very,
under quick reaction under pressure.
and that also falls into what we would call good stress. You know, it's not overwhelming. You can fail, it's okay, but it also provides that constant good stress that it takes when you're out there riding on the road or being pushed on by an opposing team. Tom, you had your hand up.
Yes, sir. So, Ron, I have been a huge fan of John Wooden for many decades, and you're very fortunate to have had that involvement. Um, I've read his autobiographical book that he wrote is called "They Call Me Coach." So, Don, you're right to feel honored by use of the word coach.
Yeah.
And Ron, I just mainly wanted to thank you because I've read extensively, but nothing I ever read. I knew his practices were extremely taxing. His goal was to make his players work much harder during practices so that when it came time for a game, that was a piece of cake. That was easy because his practices were way tougher than any game or whatever. But
Yeah.
I never was aware of his methodology and his sequencing and so forth. So it's a joy for me to have heard that from you. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah. I think everybody's shocked to find out he didn't run regular scrimmages. I
The
mean,
other, let me
coaches would come and watch. They couldn't believe what they were seeing.
one last tidbit. I did read in one of the books that I think it was Walton's second year. So Bill Walton, Arthur, was an unbelievably good basketball player. He was the MVP in the tournament one year. He made like 23 out of 24 shots during the game, the championship game. Ridiculous. I mean, nobody's ever done that before. And I think it was his second year. It could have been his third year. Walton came back to UCLA and he showed up at the first basketball practice and he had long hair. And Coach Wooden told him, Bill, you're going to need to cut your hair. And Bill said, yeah, I don't think I want to do that. No, I'm not going to do that. And Coach Wooden said, okay, don't bother coming to practice though, because you can't play on my team if you don't cut your hair. And so
Well,
the fact that Swen Nader was hanging out ready to go,
yeah,
it might have had an
go, Bill,
influence.
go.
And Walton immediately cut his hair, and there was never an issue again.
Well, the direct quote is, according to Wooden and Walton, Walton said, "It's my right to have long hair." And Coach Wooden said, "Yes, Bill, you're absolutely right. And we're going to miss you."
Thank you. That I had read that, but I did not remember it. I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah, yeah. Joe, Coach liked to tell that story. It really made him laugh.
And
So,
he called, so Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was another one of his all-time great players. And when he went to UCLA, he had played high school at Powers Memorial High School in the Bronx, New York. And growing up, Kareem, his birth name was Louis Alcindor. Wooden called him Louis his
yeah,
whole life.
yeah, he did.
And Kareem
Although, yeah, he would
Kareem was
sometimes,
happy about that.
yeah, he would in referring him, he would call him Kareem. So if he talked to other people, he would say Kareem. And by the way, one of the main reasons for going to UCLA was not only Wooden, because Jackie Robinson was a UCLA grad, and that meant something to Kareem.
Awesome. Awesome. Stanley.
Awesome. So, kind of listening to what both of you have been saying, and just a couple things, I guess, when it comes to how it relates to us as coaches within the Rider Coach community. One thing, I read this book called The Daily Stoic, and it kind of goes off of certain things. And the one verse for today may kind of make sense. As Rider coaches, sometimes we don't we have a hard time saying no, right? It's always yes, yes, yes. It's always, hey, I got to get after this. I've got to do this and that. But even when coaching, sometimes, let's just say in an incident that a student isn't making the cut. I mean, let's just be realistic, right? I think a lot more times just saying no and then looking at other avenues of approach can assist not only the student themselves, but the coach as well, and being able to be like, okay, there's a healthy boundary that I've just set, especially because, when you look at the whole premise of safety and where that includes the individual in that, because our jobs, right, as a coach is to coach, but there also comes a point where maybe that coaching needs to be at a later date. So just pondering that, and then putting that feeler out there if anyone wants to comment.
Thanks, Stanley.
Where I struggle with it, especially Don, when you put this up here as an example, I was amazed by Coach Wooden's attention to detail in terms of his team's emotional makeup. How each individual, what one person might positive reinforcement, whereas other personality types would want to be met with a challenge. And I got the impression from the book so far is that he took meticulous notes about his students, both in the classroom and out on the court, as to what their blind spots were, what they needed to work on, and how best to put that across. Am I summing that up correctly, Ron?
Yeah, he would always say, "I didn't like all my players the same, but I tried to love them all the same because they were decent, they're people. But some of them I did not like that much." He also believed deeply that he needed to get to know something about each player. And he went to some effort to meet their family, find out kind of about their background, know a little bit about where they were coming from. And he also believed that depending on where the player was as far as his uh, position, his public visibility, each one had to be treated a little bit differently. So he would say things like this: some of you are going to get a lot of attention from fans and the press. And some of it's going to be really positive and you're going to love it, even if you don't deserve it. And some of you are going to get criticism and people are going to say things to you that are critical and you're not going to like it, even if it's deserved. Right? Now you think about that. We're all like that. We all love praise, right? We all like when some people say nice things about us, even if we know for sure, well, maybe, I don't know, maybe not, we shouldn't get that. But we don't like criticism, even when we deserve it. I thought he was very perceptive about that, keeping that in mind. And he also taught the players, just remember, you're going to get praise you don't deserve, as well as that you deserve. But keep things moderate. Don't get too high and don't get too low. Don't get all boosted up when things are going well. And don't get down in the dumps. And this is the way he would talk. He was just a guy from the Midwest. Don't get all down in the dumps when something goes bad or you have a bad practice or you make mistakes, you cost us a game. Yes, it's going to happen. But what we want to go for is stay in the middle. Just keep calm and try to remember to do your best tomorrow, you know, and work on doing your best today. Tomorrow, he would say, yesterday's gone. You know, it won't come back. There's nothing you can do about it. So you just move on. Now, the players or writers you're talking about who are struggling, remember the title of that book is You Haven't Taught Until They've Learned, which means you have a tough writer that you're coaching and they're not learning, they don't have a good attitude. At some point, you know, you probably have to decide maybe it's not a good match. But until then, and I think that time comes, I had graduate students and undergraduate students that it just didn't work out with me. But until that moment comes when you make that decision, you know, you have to keep trying to find a way to reach them, change things up. And that's another thing I want to tell you about Coach Wooden. You know, every year he picked something in his coaching and tried to improve it. He called it continuous improvement. Every year he said, I got a little better because I didn't know everything. And I'd pick something, defensive rebounding or some aspect of basketball. I'd try to learn everything I could. I'd talk to other coaches. I'd talk to players. I would try to get better at teaching that specific thing. Well, guess what? Research shows that's true of teachers in general. The better teachers are those that invest in continuous improvement, getting just a little bit better at teaching something, not in general, but teaching this thing. So I've worked with lots of math teachers, for example, and many math teachers have trouble teaching fractions and early fractions, right? Kids don't get it. They don't understand fractions. It's a big bugaboo in elementary school when they hit fractions. The better teachers keep working at trying to get a little bit better at teaching different aspects of fractions or anything else. I think that's something that applies to anybody teaching and coaching anything, including yourselves.
Yeah, it's
A little bit better.
yeah. Yeah, I find it's well, thanks to groups like this where I'm surrounded by tons of people with more experience than me, I learn. Did Don tell you our challenge, which is we have 12 people we don't know. They're coming to the class, not be some of them because they really want to learn how to ride. Some of them think they know how to ride already and are here just to get a waiver to get their endorsement on their driver's license, and we only have them for a Saturday and Sunday. And it's really hard to get to know 12 people who
Yeah.
are, some of them racked with fear and some of them are racked with hubris.
Get me out of here.
Or yeah, or you have the teenage boys who,
Yeah.
you know, believe they're invincible and they know everything.
Yeah.
So we have our hands full in that.
Yeah.
But
Well, welcome, to teaching. You have any whatever level, even a graduate student, PhD students, all the way down to kindergartners. There's going to be some students, it's very hard to find the thing that'll grab their interest and engage them in the teaching learning enterprise. It's a tough job.
mm,
Uh, I wish I could give you some simple answers, but the only answer is you just have to keep trying different things, trying to reach them, trying to get to know them, find out something that resonates with them. Uh, and guess what? You won't be 100% successful. There is no formula. None. Anybody tells you, oh, here's the trick, nah, don't believe them. Don't believe them.
well, that wooden quote that you said, I didn't like um, all of my students, but I love them just the same.
I
And
tried to love them all the same because they're human beings. They got their own needs and problems and everything, but I didn't like them all.
yeah.
But I don't have to like them to be a good coach and a teacher. I just have to find some way to engage them
Mm.
and just leave the liking out of it. They can just be annoying as heck. And believe me, I had some very annoying graduate students that I worked all the way through grad school into their dissertations and got them out of there. And then 20 years later, they come back and say, gosh, Ron, you made a huge difference in me. I don't know if you know it, but you changed my life. And I'm thinking, how in the heck did I do that? Because I don't remember you with all that positive feeling that you're expressing now.
What was your behavior, right? You were modeling something, so they
I
noticed
don't know. I don't know.
15 years ago.
I was clenching my teeth sometimes, Arthur. And I wasn't always perfect. I'm just human. I made mistakes. Believe me. I said and did things. I look back and, that if you're going to get in this, you're going to get into this influencing other people. Uh, you got to admit your own human frailties.
Mm.
Therese?
Thank you for being here, Ron. I really appreciate it. I haven't read the book yet. It's on my list. But you mentioned trying to be better all the time, a little better than you were yesterday. That's a standard rule of thumb. But do you know if Coach Wooden had any tricks to get his mind ready for his next challenge? Before practice, did he have a thinking process before a game? Anything like that you could share with us? How
Well,
to get in the right frame of mind?
right. Well, I know he was, very committed to his family. And when he left UCLA practice and went home, he tried to forget basketball until the next morning. And then the next morning, he devoted to planning instruction. So he found time in his schedule for planning the instruction down to the detail, focusing on what were they going to talk about. He even, in his little cards he carried around, 3x5 cards, he wrote down corrections that he was going to deliver to specific players that day. So let's say he had a tall boy on that last team, 18 years old, 7'2", unpolished player, but with promise. And this boy had a lot of bad habits. If you know the game, if you're a tall boy center, one of your big jobs is to get rebounds. This boy had a habit of leaving his hands down at his sides. But what he was supposed to do when a shot went up, he was supposed to have those hands up ready for a rebound, and he would forget to do it. And even when he did do that, he would sometimes stand there and hold the ball. And what he was supposed to do was quickly pass it to a guard or a forward to initiate a fast break, right? Pass it quickly. Well, he would stand there and hold the ball. Coach Wooden wrote on one of those 3-5 cards, focus on Ralph today. Tell him to pass it to someone short. I saw him do that. I wrote it in my notes in 1975. There's Ralph holding the ball, and Coach Wooden shouts instantly, Ralph, pass it to someone short. He prepared that. So his mindset was have specific corrections for each player. So if you're teaching 12 riders and you have begun to analyze their needs, then he would be, I think, telling you, well, think about the things they need correction. I made a little list. I did a little internet searching, and I understand that one of the training exercises, is this right? You have players do cone weave on their bikes. Is that right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, is this correct? Correct me if I'm wrong. I just did a little research this afternoon. You would be watching for head position, throttle control, micro hesitations, and where the eyes go before a turn. Any of those resonate?
All of them.
Okay, so you have a player. Okay, you got players, you got riders, and their throttle control is not right. You're going to plan to look for a chance to deliver a quick correction if the throttle control, that's how he would prepare for a practice. You would think, you mentioned 12, I think, Arthur.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, if you can't think of corrections for every 12, do as many as you can.
Yep.
And then keep notes during your sessions on things that each rider needs correcting. And then think the next time, which ones are most important? And only focus on a few. Don't be machine gunning a lot of corrections. It just confuses the learners. They're going to learn to do one or two things better every lesson that you teach. Now, if you're, ready and they get better and you can see, maybe you can up the game a little bit, and focus on head position. By the way, Sherry, I have a first cousin named Sherry.
You spell it the same way?
No, she has an I at the end. But she lives in Ohio, so what would you expect? They always in Ohio they always say Ohio. They
Uh-huh.
always draw out
Yeah,
those
Ohio.
final vowels,
Yeah. I have a lot of friends in Ohio too.
In Ohio, yeah, you got the dialect.
So one of the great things in our Bible, our book, the Writer Coach Guide, Ron, is it differentiates three major underpinnings, and I just wrote a note down for the next time we get together to bring it up and show you. But not only are we concerned about safety, but we're we're developing motor skills. And so what you just talked about in my mind was when we look at the problems or the corrections that need to be made, we do them from gross to fine, meaning the most important one first. And then as they accumulate the important stuff, then we can go down the line to the finer coaching aspects of it.
The technical description of what you just said is curriculum, scope, and sequence.
Yes.
What's the scope of things you're teaching and what's the sequence you teach them in? So that's
So
just fancy words for what you said very clearly.
the other part besides safety and motor skill development is the adult learning process. And many of the things that you've discussed in these sequences that we're talking about lead back to then. How do you um, coach without overwhelming them, machine gunning them, so to speak? You know,
Yeah.
that one thing as a human that we can remember and work on until the next thing. And you also said, you know, what are we looking at during the weaves, and when we coach them and how we coach them, then is very important. If the motorcycle is moving, we can use nonverbal signals, you know, like turn your head or look out, um, as they're riding and manipulating the controls so as not to overwhelm them with a verbal coaching um, methodology. Whereas opposed to when they come to a stop, then we can be verbal, very short, those 10 to 15-second, this is what we want to do, that one gross thing, and then send them on the way. So that
Have them do it again right away.
absolutely that immediate feedback
Yes.
that Coach Wooden was talking about. So there's many parallels in what you've discussed tonight with what our curriculum and our experiences tells us to do.
Well, the stuff I've been talking about Coach Wooden in the research on expertise development, whether it's basketball or motorcycle riding or surgery, the term is the deliberate practice, the research called deliberate practice, and there's certain principles of deliberate practice. And our research indicates that of the 11 or so, 12, Coach Wooden routinely used 10 of them before that term was even coined. So he had somehow discovered these things, and he always credited everybody, other coaches, people he had watched and learned from. He never took credit for any of it himself. He said, everything I know, I learned from somebody else. He was extremely uh, modest about all that. He wouldn't take credit.
So that kind of opens the door, Ron. Can you talk a little bit about your latest research with Karen?
Well, let's see. I I had distilled into that PowerPoint uh, versions of the deliberate practice, but here what this most recent study tried to do. If you search John Wooden and his coaching and teaching, you're going to see the word repetition over and over and over again. There's literally thousands of websites saying that Wooden was successful because he practiced repetition. Repetition, repetition, repetition. But the implication is kind of rote learning, just doing the same thing over mindlessly without much thought. But that's not what he was doing. He was breaking things down into these specific skills. So what we did was try to correct the record. And we took the principles of deliberate practice, which are in the article, and I'm happy to send a copy to anybody that wants it. Um, the principles are listed in the article from the research literature and expertise development. And we looked at everything we could find. The research that I had done, that Swen had done. We interviewed Swen. We interviewed Gary Cunningham, who had been coach's assistants for, I don't know, 14 or 15 years, had also been a player for Wooden. We interviewed a high school coach that Coach Wooden had mentored for 10 years. And when he started mentoring this high school coach, he was about to lose his job because they'd lost 70 games and won 7 in 3 years. So he had one more year to get it right. Well, with Coach Wooden's help, he got much better the next year, and after 2 more years became the league champion and coach of the year because Coach Wooden taught him how to coach, right? And if you look at what all of these people, Gary Cunningham, Swen Nader, and this high school coach, what they tell us uh, he uh, he was, teaching them to use the principles of deliberate practice. That's what it is. So if you look at the article, and if you want to really mess up your mind with a bunch of, turgid academic writing, I beg you to think twice before you drink this poison chalice, because it was written for academics in a journal article. Skip around and find the list of deliberate practices. They're in a table, and I think you might find it useful. I mean, it's going to take some translation. I understand. Even the context of your teaching and coaching is so completely different. Um, but the principles, I think, are sound and apply to teaching in any area, from basketball to math to science to motorcycle riding. Um, to teaching writing, that's kind of what I do these days, sort of on an informal basis. Um, I try to teach people how to write better in my old age, now that I'm retired. Um, so I can actually, is it possible? I think I can post
I
this in
I
a
can
chat.
post it, Ron.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
Uh,
Don.
and just so everybody's aware, not only did I post that particular bit of research, but there's 5 more or 4 more out there that Ron has been a part of. They're all posted underneath the link to my website. If you
Yeah.
don't have access, let me know. And with
So,
that, there's a list of other readings for your benefit if you so desire.
yeah, don't be like those students of that was mentioned earlier. Show up and don't want to learn anything, right? Don, before I sign off, I want to add a personal note. So I don't know when I'm going to be needing to sign off here myself, but perhaps I could add. Is there time for me to add a quick little note?
You can say whatever you want,
Okay.
however you want. You're the
Okay.
you're the you're the guest of honor tonight, Ron.
Okay. Well, that that I'm going to change. I'm going to change that right away. This is going to embarrass Don a little, I think. Uh, I got this email. Don said, "Hey, can we meet?" We met at a local restaurant here in Delaware, where I'm now living. And, I didn't know him. I looked up a little bit about what he was doing, and I thought, wow, this is a good thing that he's working on. Then I learned about his background in the Army, and I don't know how it came up. Maybe he asked me if I had ever served in the American Armed Forces. And I made a joke about being one of those draft dodgers who had joined the National Guard. He reached across the table and took my hand and said something that completely rattled me. He said, Ron, uh, you joined the National Guard in 1956 when you were 18 years old. You stood up and took the oath, and not that many Americans that have taken that oath who are still living. You're one of a very small minority. And even though you might not think it was important, you did take the oath, and you wore the uniform, and you signed up for whatever might come. And at that time, you had no idea that you would actually end up never being deployed or ever facing any danger other than rattlesnakes, poison oak, and scorpions, which I did face many times. I was rattled and I was shaken. I told my eldest daughter about this conversation, and she said, "Dad, he's right. You're not, we know you did it, but what was it all about?" And that has changed my life. Don got me to respect the service in the National Guard, not for my own ego, but for the other many people in our country who signed up, took the oath, faced the possibility of something unpleasant, whether it happened or not. You should respect that service. I have not stopped thinking about that since he took my hand and gave me that reminder. It led me to pulling out my discharge, having it framed, and it's now hanging on the wall next to my diplomas here in my little study where I'm sitting right now. I really want to thank you, Don. It was a signal moment in my life. I am no longer making jokes or laughing, making fun of what I did. I am respecting it. I'm not going to brag about it, but I'm going to respect it. But I can still tell the funny stories, and there were a lot of them, of all the things that we got into and funny events that happened. And I'm still enjoy those funny moments, but now I respect the bigger part of it. So thank you, Don. That's the personal note I wanted to end my participation on. And I want to thank you all for listening to me. And if you ever decide you want me to come back and you think I have anything more to say, or if you just want to talk to me, sometime in the future, I'd be happy to help if I can. So with that, I bid you all farewell with my.
You can't leave yet, Ron. You can't just say stuff like that and go away without any back and forth, at least.
Okay, all right, I'm here.
So Ron let me know this earlier today. He sent me the picture of his plaque, and it really touched me. And the first thing I did was I looked at the unit and went out and did a quick search on the unit. And what a prestigious unit you were a part of, with roots tracing back to the Pacific Theater, and a unit that achieved accolades from General MacArthur. So that's quite significant. But more importantly, the last thing that I saw was that the unit's motto, and I wish I could say it properly, cuidado.
Cuidado.
Cuidado. Okay,
be careful. Beware. Yeah. Be careful. Cuidado is Spanish for be careful.
Okay.
Cuidado.
But the translation I got from the internet said take care.
Yes.
And take care was, as I read that, I was like, man, that's really an excellent motto for a person like Ron, who through the decades has taken care of others and given them the opportunity to be better, to always be improving, continuous improvement. And so, Ron, I know personally you've had a great effect on my life, and I thank you very much for your time. And you are welcome to just show up if you want to show up anytime, because that's kind of the rule around here is people show up when they can, and when life is busy and they can't, that's okay too. But we certainly love to talk coaching in here, and I want you to I want to make you already get all the emails, an honorary member of Rider Coach Life. Thank you. We greatly appreciate what you've done in documenting these great things from the past so that we can learn from them and be better coaches in the future.
That would be a very Coach Wooden thing to say. Coach better every time.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks
all you coaches. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Wow, what a unexpected pleasure, huh?
Totally.
So let's soak this in for a couple minutes. What are your thoughts about meeting Dr. Ron Gallimore, the coach?
It was great to hear his perspective on some things. I'm so used to just getting stuff from MSF or my co-coaches, but to hear a different voice from a different part of motor skill development. There's really no point to that. I'm sorry.
No, I think that's a great point. And, when I think about our individual development, we have to take information from every perspective that could benefit us to be a better coach. Whether it be from basketball, or I get coaching from my special education wife I hear her talking to other teachers about kids or other teachers or other adults that they deal with. And all that comes in to the mix of who we are as coaches.
Yeah.
So I think that's very poignant, Arthur.
As he was talking, I was thinking, about different exercises and, like zeroing in on just one thing. We're doing exercise 4. We're really focusing on shifting and stopping. If they make the corner, don't care, unless they're doing crazy stuff,
Right.
to kind of keep the coaching focused. And when they talked about, individual coaching, we're watching a bunch of people riding around, they're doing exercise 3, and we're thinking, well, what am I going to say to this person the next time they come back, and kind of, watching their whole progress, but everybody's getting coaching that's specific to them.
Well, I made a comment in the chat. What came to my mind was how important it would be for me as a rider coach to prepare for a class by reviewing the motor skill errors that a student may do at a particular exercise. Write that down, and then what are some of the corrections or solutions I could give a particular student to address that motor skill area? And by being able to, I'll say review, but I did another thing on, there's a book called Make It Stick by Peter Brown, Roger III, and McDaniel. And I was watching a interpretation of that book by a Science of Successful Learning. And basically their philosophy was verbal to visual. And it talked about 3 stages that Make It Stick covered. And that was, when we learn, we need to be able to retrieve it. Or if we're studying, we need to retrieve it, but not review it. If you review it, you're looking at your notes or whatever. That's not the same as retrieval. And they emphasize, the difference on that. And then the way we learn, the best way we learn is by spacing things out. In other words, don't keep doing bam, 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 bam. Okay. Work on a specific skill, which we kind of do in the BRC. And then we take a break, and then we come back to it. Maybe not us specifically working on that skill, but it's part of the building block process. We expect you to continue working on that skill. So that came to mind. And then, it needs to be varied. We got to keep people interested. So again, getting back to my point, what came to my mind is I'm going to start putting down what I interpret as students' motor skill errors. And then I'm going to come up with different things to coach them on to help correct that error, and then review those before each class so that when I'm repeating the same correction, even though the student is different, the same correction for that motor skill error, and I know it'll benefit me enormously in the long run to help me see that error. So that's the biggest takeaway I got from Ron being here today. And I thank you for that, Don. That just like laser pointed me in a direction.
Carolyn, I'm preparing a PDW now, and we're kind of focusing on exercises 2 and 3, where we have a lot of development happening. And we noticed in QA visits that a lot of the newer coaches, they see the errors that are happening, but they don't always have the language to give the feedback. So part of my shtick is going to be to break out and say, well, what are the errors that you expect to have happen? How are you going to identify them through sight and sound and et cetera? And then what specific coaching can you give to provide that feedback? And hopefully some of the more experienced coaches are going to be able to, provide some, some phrases, tips that has worked for them to convey the information. So having that stuff in your pocket ahead of time is a good thing, I think.
Right. Well, and I'm also thinking that, I do things like that when I'm coaching, but I want to be able to have them in my toolbox, my toolkit, that I can pull it out each and every time rather than, well, let's see, how did I reword it this last time? With a little bit of flexibility, structured flexibility, of course, but just so that I'm, helping people learn the things they need to learn easily.
Thank you, Leanne. Can I pre-order that book? Can I pre-order a copy of that book, please?
It doesn't work if you don't do it yourself. So both of you kind of touched on this, and I guess what Sherry just said kind of ties it all together. I got an asterisk next to this note from his discussion. Coaches spent 3 hours a day preparing for the players before the players got there. And so I was in a PDW recently, and they were talking about, what do you do before you coach? It may have been here, not last week, but before. Do you open up the book and read it in preparation for what's going on?
Oh no, you gotta smoke a cigarette and have a coffee.
But I mean, that was one of my key notes that I wrote down for Ron was coaches spent 3 hours preparing for players every day before practice.
Well, they were also, I mean, the point's valid that it takes a lot of prep. I think the thing that we have going for us is we don't have to produce like lesson plans, the
True.
range cards and the RCG, that is all done. So thankfully, but still, I love Carol Ann's suggestion of, because I stare at the range cards long enough, and I do them, over breakfast in the off season or mornings before I teach, and my brain glazes over. But I like the idea of calling to mind all the stuff that I've seen work, that I've said or somebody else has said for a specific mistake. Have those top of mind, like ready to go. That's a great idea.
So that was the second note that I wrote down when I was listening to the ladies here was, isn't our range cards the 3x5 cards that coach carried around?
Yeah.
But that doesn't stop you from taking notes on them. And one of the habits that I have is I carry around a pencil, especially when I'm doing a RiderCoach prep, is when I see a candidate do something wrong, I'll circle it, put their name next to it, or something that needs to be fixed, so that later on, as I'm doing evaluations or I'm getting ready to provide feedback to them, I have it written down and I can go up to them, hey, I noticed that you were doing this. Can you tell me why so I can understand? Or why did you do that in this particular moment? Is there another thing that you can do if you read the cards? So those were our 3x5 cards, like Arthur said, we're carrying them around. They're already there. But that doesn't prohibit you from making notes on them so that you can be better, whether it's a student or a candidate or another coach. Hey, I noticed you were standing over here. Can you tell me why? Can we discuss that a little bit? And that's where that peer-to-peer interaction comes up, where we better things.
The first thing I do in every prep is hand each candidate a mechanical pencil.
Absolutely. What else? Tom's just been grinning ear to ear back there.
Well, Larry talked about my history and my all-encompassing respect and love for John Wooden, and the fact that you know Ron Gallimore and his involvement. I mean, that the whole thing just blew me away. I will, since you called upon me, though, I got a couple things to say about, and unlike Arthur, as I said earlier, I've had a lifetime of involvement with the game of basketball. I'm a huge basketball guy. I'm physically, I'm never going to be I could have never been, I'm way too old now, but even in my prime, I could have never been a great player. But there are a lot of similarities, and that's what we've been talking about between that and, the whole Wooden idea and that kind of coaching and what we do. But there are differences too. There are important differences. So one important difference is basketball is a team sport. And you got 5 players on the court at a time on the same team. And the way they interact with one another is really important to the game of basketball. And for teaching 12 students to ride motorcycles, it's not the same. It's not, that team aspect of it is not the same. Maybe there is a team aspect of it, I don't know, but definitely not the same. Another really important difference is Coach Wooden was able to interact with these human beings for the length of a basketball season minimum. And back when he was doing it for 4 years with the same human beings. So he had a long time to work with individual human beings. And we got 2 days for the most part. So, and then you talked just now, Don, you were talking about taking notes on your range cards. And he talked about 3x5 cards. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I can't, it doesn't work. Standing on a range with 12 students in real time, the way the flow happens, the way we all do it is you pay attention to what the heck's going on, and you give your best shot to somebody. In exercise 4, they just shifted for the first time. They pull up next to you and you tell them one thing. Every once in a while I deviate and I tell them 2 things, but I try to keep it to one thing. And then I have to keep that in mind for the next time they come around to my side. And I got to watch them to see whether or not they paid attention and they listened to that and they're trying to do what I said. And I'll tell you, you've all experienced this, when if they do listen and it works out better for them, oh my gosh, that's awesome. And I take very great pains, as I bet all of you do, that when that person comes back the next time, if they listen to what you said and it helped, you mention it to them. You say, wow, man, that's what makes coaching so great. Thank you for listening. I'm glad that helped you. Now let's try this or whatever. So it's a lot of fun.
So a couple notes on what you said. First of all, I wonder if you have one of these hanging on your wall.
I do not, but I'm certainly familiar with the Pyramid of Success. And when Ron was showing us the picture of John Wooden's den, I may be the only person, maybe you, Don, but his 10 championship teams, the photos on the wall, they were in the shape of a pyramid, people. He had 1 at the top, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. So, and his definition. So one of the videos that you shared for tonight, Don, included some discussion about Coach Wooden's definition of success. So the game of basketball, college, big-time college basketball, NBA, pro basketball, or whatever, everybody defines success as winning and losing. Winning is success. Not John Wooden. And he didn't just say it, he meant it. So if you haven't watched that video that includes his definition of success, which I think it might have been the Swen Nader 2016 one. It was either that or the book study part 1. You didn't, the Wooden one with him actually talking was too short for him to include his definition of success. But it basically, it involves preparing yourself, working as hard as you can within your capabilities to be the best that you can be. If you've done that, you've succeeded.
So I told you that I put a link. It was the very first thing in the chat box tonight. There is a piece of literature in there written by Gilbert, Nader, Seawick, and Gallimore on the pyramid of teaching in sports. So they published that in 2010. So once again, out in the reference library where all the book recommendations are, at the very bottom, there's a whole bunch of research papers by Ron Gallimore. And if you have problems getting into it, let me know. You said something, Tom, about team sports versus what we're doing. And I would like to call everybody's attention to the 4 riding subtasks. Does anybody remember what they are?
We're doing the
physical,
EP1 by
social,
11,
emotional.
and you have to ask them that question when you get to that segment or whatever. So yeah, I do. But
so
you ask the way you do it is you ask them if they remember it from the e-course. And I've never had a student, and I've been doing this for 3 or 4 years now. I've never had a student say, "Oh yeah, here are the 4, 1, 2, 3." If they get one, it's good. And if you give them one, if you give them physical, a lot of times somebody will say mental or whatever, and you can get it out of them. But
the reason why I'm talking about it is not that I want them to remember it, but as coaches, we should understand that the social aspect of what they're doing on the range is a team sport. And it's also the range. I think this actually is in the RiderCoach guide, is a small city. And so if you put those things into perspective, it's a small city. There's a bunch of people riding motorcycles within the small city, and we all have to be sociable about the way we do it and get along with others. Is that not the same thing as being on a team in a sport?
And also that we're practicing drills, but then we put it all together within this mixed context of traffic on the range, and we have to play together.
Yeah. So when we get to exercises 11, 12, 13, we are playing a team sport. So the correlations here between basketball and I love the fact that he went out and he did an internet search so that he could figure out as a teacher how he could relate and what transfer experiences, transfer of what he does or what his knowledge is to our knowledge. And he did that pre-work like John would have.
Right.
So, I mean, the correlations are endless. What else do we have? Murray, you've been quiet. We're going to pick on Murray.
Well, no, I think the process that the coach was using was very good. And I think in a certain light, it goes along with a process that we use as rider coaches. I think the challenge is what Tom was mentioning is, man, we unpack a lot in 2 days. And how do we get that across? And just speaking personally now, I think the more time you spend in tab 5, the more time you spend in the range cards and the narratives, and the more you do research outside of our bubble, if you will, I think what happens and again, my opinion only, I think what happens over time is you absorb enough that when you unpack on the range, it becomes almost intuitive, or it can become almost intuitive. I mean, I believe ochre applies everywhere and not just when you're watching someone come down the range.
Right.
You know, if you're in a staging area, ochre will tell you so much about your students' learning styles, how they like to receive information, how they like to get involved. So again, my opinion only, what I've tried to do is distill it down so when I have a situation where I have a student that's struggling, I really try to keep the coaching to a minimum. But I'm also, lately, I've had a tendency to say, how's it going? Show me what you're doing. And I ask them to show me what they're actually doing with the controls. And then instead of saying, this is what you should do, I'll say, well, what might happen if you tried this next time? And then turn them loose because I think that helps them self-assess. And I think B, it gives them a solution that they can explore. And I think when I think about what Coach Wooten is doing, I'm pretty much guessing that his corrections were in that same vein. I'll know more Thursday because the book is coming from Amazon on Thursday. So once I read it, I'll have a better idea. And again, my opinion, I think it's easy for us as coaches when we have to unpack all this stuff that we maybe make it too complicated when it's a simple human interaction. How are you doing? How can I help you? So that's just my 2 cents.
So I'm gonna move down as the term he used, machine gunning information. I see a coach that does that all the time, and mom always like, zip it, zip it.
Not a good thing. I mean, what is the norm from the videos, Don, that a piece of information that is an instruction that comes into your head as a student maybe sticks around for 15 seconds.
Right.
And so if that's the time frame you've got, man, how about just keep it simple and then shut up?
So that goes back to sticking your hand in the bucket of ice, in and out.
Out.
One
Yeah.
thing.
I have a T-shirt that I'm going to wear this year when I'm doing QA, and in the front it says WAIST, and in the back it says, "Why am I still talking?"
Right.
And I think that's something I have to remind myself about a lot, but it's really our jobs. Don't talk so much. Give a piece and let them chew it up and ride around.
So
If it's not working out, then give them something else.
So your point is well taken about asking a question, because I think the times when, I look at times when teachers, regardless of what the subject is, have asked me a question instead of, answered my question with a question, asking me what I think, or, how am I doing, or what, just like you said, Murray, that has always stayed with me longer than just another instruction. Do it like this.
A
Yeah.
place where a coach, I learned this from another coach, but a place where that show me really, really comes in handy is during exercise 6. Show me how you're going to make the motorcycle turn this way. And they either know it or they don't. And it's very instantly obvious. And actually a new coach taught me that a bazillion years ago. And I was like, wow, that is brilliant. I use it every class because there's always somebody that's messing it up. And
Right.
I can tell instantly what's going on there.
Well, back in the day, Keith Code at Superbike School in California, one of his favorite phrases, well, what do you think?
Right.
So, yeah.
Arthur, what you were talking about when a teacher answers the question with another question, what's that called?
I have no clue.
Anybody else? It's ancient.
I think
Is it the Jesus syndrome?
No,
Socrates used it, I believe.
Socratic method.
it's a Socratic method.
Yeah,
Right.
Socratic method.
Yeah, so it still works today.
Yeah.
Ancient Greece. One of the things you said, Murray, about connecting with other human beings, was another one of my starred notes was attention to detail, the emotional well-being of others, who they were, know something about the student. And we've talked about that so many times about the effects that we can have if we just spend that few moments up front to find out who they are, where they are. And it was kind of a juncture for me, not only what Ron said and what you said, but I've been listening to Jocko Willink, a former SEAL, and he was talking about relationships and how he's got 5 things that he looks in a relationship. You got to have trust. You got to be able to listen. You have to be able to influence, show respect, and care. And if you don't show those things to who you're dealing with, they're not going to show those things back to you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the one example I have that stuck with me, and this was a number of years ago, I had a gentleman in a class who just kind of hung back from the group, and he was kind of doing okay, but you could just tell that he just wasn't engaging. And finally, at a break between 2 and 3, I think it was, I said, "Hey, what do you do?" And he goes, "Well," he goes, "I'm a machinist." And I go, "Wow." I said, "My grandfather was a machinist, and my dad, of many talents, was also a machinist." I said, "You like diagrams and numbers and instructions?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, it's the best." Handed him a set of range cards. Solved the problem. Might have been a lucky guess on my part, but I think we can, if we're open enough to be open to other people and what their needs are, I think we can do that consistently. And as much as people coach, just guys, just pay attention. You know?
Sometimes it's as simple as asking them, is there something I can do that would make it easier for you,
Yeah.
to do whatever?
What an epiphany. Ask. So new coaches ask me, they go, how do you know what to do? I say, I ask the student. 9 times out of 10, they'll tell you. You know, if you just pay attention and show you care, yeah. I think adults in learning situations appreciate that more than we understand.
Yeah,
I think it's easy for us to get caught up in unpacking all the stuff and glazing over, if you will, what people are trying to tell us, sometimes non-verbally.
Well, and especially if they haven't been in a learning environment for a while, we get a lot of people with, college is 25 years ago. And, you know, the whole learning thing is kind of a new old experience for them.
Yeah, well, I also think the more we do that, the more we present them the opportunity to self-assess. But I also think riding a motorcycle in today's traffic is a continual learning environment.
Yeah.
And I think it's just important that we try to communicate that. I'll put it that way. Anyway, enough of me. I'll shut up.
Also keep in mind, in your example of, relationships, when you ask somebody, the question about what's going on or what can I do to help, it's showing that you care.
Yeah.
Lynn, I remember the fact about, not being in a classroom for many, many years.
What a night. And here's one of the things that both excites me and makes me sad. You all had the opportunity to sit and listen to one of America's greats talk about another one of America's greats. And so I'm disappointed that other people had other things to do. I know it was a late email and event notice, but man, was it worth it from my perspective. And once again, I got probably 4 of them I really need to look at and produce and get back out so other people can see them. But if I never do, you were here. And that's kind of special. Man, I really don't have anything more to say, and I know we're over. So enjoy your couple of weeks, because I have some business to do. So it will be a couple of weeks before we get back. Thanks for showing up tonight. It was kind of a special night, and I'm really glad that you all showed up. I love y'all. Don't take it the wrong way. We'll see you on the other side.
Thank you very, very much for this evening.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you for participating in this episode of Rider Coach Life, brought to you by RiderChoices. If you are a rider coach, you can catch other episodes by logging into www.riderchoices.com, or you can also find links at RiderCoach Life or RiderCoach Trainer Life Facebook groups. Please remember the Motorcycle Safety Foundation's 5 core questions and always survive the ride. Take care.